As we look ahead, there's a pressing question every leader must consider. With intelligent tools transforming operations and decision-making at lightning speed, how do we ensure that we remain indispensable? How can organizations leverage automation without losing the human touch that drives creativity, judgment, and connection? These are the challenges at the heart of today's session. In Are We Automating Ourselves into Obsolescence, our panelists will explore strategies for redesigning roles, workflows, and leadership models to stay relevant and future-ready. They will share practical insights, forward-thinking perspectives, and lessons from organizations navigating rapid technological change. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause as we welcome our expert panelists to the stage. We have Michael Terlizzi, Rick Saake, I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrect, Head of Digital and Digital Results. We have Jev Wray, Principal Advisor at Maverixx LLC. Dragana Linfield, Senior Director, Technology Consulting at Ernst Young. And Vivek, I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, Mahendra, Managing Partner at Vivikta Advisory and Creatives. Let's have them take it away.
You want me over there? Yeah.
On the podium.
Switch with me.
Okay. Hello, man.
Never heard myself say that out loud.
A little tight, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. So, welcome to our panel about AI and whether or not we're going to automate ourselves into oblivion. I take a middle ground on this. These panelists, wonderful panelists, all have much more expertise. I'd like them to go ahead and introduce themselves, starting from the back and coming back this way.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Dragana Linfield, and I have over 25 years of experience at the intersection of technology, innovation, and business. Most recently, my focus has been machine learning and AI, and currently I'm working at Ernst Young, helping 500 Fortune companies innovate in a better way so that they can reduce cost, increase revenue, and also elevate customer experience. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vivek Mahendra. I think you are very close to the Vivek that you mentioned, so it's almost there. I have about 35 years of experience, but I think in the space that we're talking about, it has democratized that completely because your experience doesn't count. All of us are in the 5-year experience range or so. So I think let's first of all acknowledge that part. That's very important. I run an enterprise architecture advisory firm. I work with Fortune 1000 companies in helping in their AI adoption strategy. A lot of interesting things that Praful mentioned in the conversation last time resonate with what we intend to be talking about now. So look forward to an interesting conversation.
My name is Rick Saake. I'm the head of digital at Digital Results. We are a digital marketing firm that specializes in looking at how AI can help being seen within search engines, within a lot of the agentic systems that are coming out, and then setting up for success in the future. And again, we've seen huge changes. I've been doing digital marketing for more than 30 years. And we were talking earlier, programming and laughing at some of the things, programming with punch cards, that kind of dates how long I've been working with computers. So, and just how things have changed.
Hello, Jev Wray, and founder and principal advisor at Maverixx. And primarily at Maverixx, we actually work with a lot of startups, all AI native startups, that seed through about Series D, just about, with Palantir being the one exception, I guess. And essentially just work with them to build our engineering teams. But more recently, my focus has actually shifted towards building out a new AI infrastructure layer for the systems in and of themselves. So essentially a cognitive substrate, very much similar to what's been talked about just recently here on the stage about context, really, but building context into an infrastructure, if you will, or more specifically cognition for models.
Great. And my experience with AI is much less extensive. I have been studying it, and my opinion of it is that will it automate us into oblivion? I say maybe, but only if we let it. Because Because if we let it do the thinking for us, if we let it do the work for us, then our brains will atrophy, will regress to the mean as a society, and just become, you know, average at best. And that's my worry with AI automating. We automate the tasks, we automate the thinking. I'm not scared of the Terminator scenario where the world blows up. I'm scared of the Matrix scenario where the agent tells Neo, once you let us do the thinking for you, well, where are we now? We have to choose. How are we going to do the thinking or not do it? Are we going to learn the craft or not learn it? Are we going to let AI do it or not? But with that, because that's my opinion, I'd like to shift over to Dragana, who has experience working at MIT, sees tons of use cases, right? What is the most common use case you see?
Yes, so what is really surprising is that across all industries, there is one common theme, which is how can we convert the data of the company, each enterprise, into strategic asset. So that is something that is happening. So when I teach at MIT, the leaders and executives who come from different industries, they have either already starting doing that or just preparing to start. So that means that all the data, which is actually the moat, as we've seen in the previous organization, it's not the model, it's the data that company possesses. They know everything about their customers, they have the data. So they have now stopped just collecting the data, but actively started using the data to understand what is going on in a company and to help them make business decisions. And so it's a universal approach. So what can they do with their data and what have we seen? The first thing we've seen is that the common use case is to use it for personalization. Use the data so you can personalize experience and journeys of your customers. And what better example than Netflix? We know that Netflix is a master in personalization, and even the thumbnails that you see for the same movie is always different than the same movie that I see, because they want to personalize to your preferences. So personalization is a very, very common use case. The second use case, which is very interesting, is in healthcare, which is to use the data, the massive amounts of data about the patients and the previous patients to understand at early stage where a disease is developing so that they can actually act on it and stop it and prevent it from that. So that's the second usage of data where you identify the patterns and you can at early stage have a cure and not just wait. And lastly, the common case, again, across the industries is to use the data to prevent churn. Everybody has churn, and we know that the cost of acquisition is much more expensive than keeping the customer. So what companies are doing is they are collecting the data from their customers, which is internal data. They're also collecting external data sources, all structured and unstructured data and metadata, so they can use it to predict, given user behavior, whether that user is likely to churn or not. And the best part of it, not only to understand the driver of it, but since you know the driver of his possible churn, you are going to act and intervene much earlier with the right next best action, which is another use of AI. So just to sum up this kind of use cases is companies are shifting from trying to understand what is going on to predicting it and preventing it. So that's what we've seen.
And it's interesting you mentioned Netflix, because around the time I was still working in television, Netflix was a big thing. When it started streaming, it was a big thing. And their whole philosophy was air your content for free. We'll give you a cut of the license, people will get into the show, and they'll start watching. And Breaking Bad proved that point. Look at the ratings, and then the ratings, then it's free. Boom, everyone watches it. But they hold on to their IP. But the Netflix one finally was the one that broke through, the personalization, the thumbnails, the things you want to watch based on what you've watched. Just don't let your wife get on, make a separate. In any case, however, there are some things I think that should not be automated, right? That should maybe not be optimized, not automated. And I think, Rick, was that something you would?
Yeah.
He's got more experience. For me, it's just healthcare. There's parts of healthcare, and there are parts of life-critical situations, but Rick's got a more informed opinion, so take it away.
We've seen with clients, the biggest questions we always ask them up front is, where are the major touch points for your brand? Where is the public seeing you, and how is that portrayed? And it can be everything from a sales process or a customer service system that goes on. And you want to make sure that those still are like the last things that you would ever want to touch from an AI perspective. And a perfect example is Klarna in 2024, huge early adopter. They basically canned 700 of their customer service reps that were handling all of their clients because they were going all in on AI. They built out an AI system that was supposed to answer all the questions that people had. And just last September, their CEO basically had to come out and say it was a mistake that we went so far that direction. Where you could take the same aspect and say, how can I use AI to be more beneficial? B of A, perfect example. They use auditory AI to listen to people at the very beginning of a customer service call. The issue was they were only getting about 15% of the people that went through their customer service tree and talking to people that actually got an answer that they were really successful with. And so that number is really low, but it was something very consistent within the industry. Now B of A listens to the person as they're talking and answering the questions through their tree. And as that's listening to it, it's making decisions on who the person actually needs to talk to, whether it's at a supervisor level. It can also be things where they have regionality. So if somebody's talking and they may have more of a southern discussion and as they're answering the questions, they may put them being answered by someone that has a very similar dialect. Same thing for like New York. If you're going to talk to somebody that's from New York or Boston.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah. And they've actually moved the needle. They're almost at a 60% success rate in their customer service now going through their phone tree system. And that's a huge opportunity because they still talk to people. Those personal jobs are there, but they found a way to use AI at the front end to just get them to the right person in a much quicker fashion. Vivek, you had some ideas too on that one. You had the 3 levels, right?
That's correct. So although I may have a little more optimism to the whole scenario, only from a perspective that, so I think there are 2 interesting things. For the first time in so many years, as enterprise architects, we are in demand. We have never been in demand. We're always somebody who will be doing things in the background and things may happen, or we will be accepted, or we would kind of thought the other way around. But as a fraternity, we see now for the first time, since when we talk about adoption of AI, it's no longer a plug-in of an automation here or an acceleration there. It has now started becoming a more orchestrated, more deeper, and as Praful mentioned in this conversation, a more context-driven adoption. And I think the moment we go to more context-driven adoption, we are basically charting the path from strategy articulation to business process definition to information architecture to data architectures. And those are very, very interesting points that are coming in play, primarily from a standpoint of the 3-dimensionality that I talked about, or I want to talk about. The first one is controls. So, interesting example, but if we were to look at customer support in isolation and don't tie it back to a KPI which has a direct impact in terms of the business or a business impact, what we are actually doing is we are trying to fix a problem at a place where the problem actually doesn't exist. We are trying to fix a problem where it is a superficial expression of the output of a business process, never the business process itself. So I think important elements are that where do you put a control, and when you put a control, when I say control, controls are in facets of strategy articulation, data architectures, in terms of maybe, for example, governance, and so on. So they'll come into play as a part of it. Now, you have to also look at a very different perspective here. Controls also mean the way your organization looks at these things. So the moment we look at AI adoption, suddenly what is autonomy equivalent to augmentation are questions like who takes the decision on what the AI should take a call on and what it should not take a call on. Right? And these are very interesting points that we have to look at. A lot of work that I do at this layer is working with the organizational capability definition and the organization design definition, in terms of what the board will take as responsibility, what the business owners will take responsibility, what will be the role of an technologist now, because it no longer remains to be an IT system provisioner, but it becomes a controller, it becomes a a guardrail setup. It becomes maybe, for example, an auditor, and so on and so forth. It becomes multiple such roles that kind of brings in play there. So one is the whole aspect of the capability definition and the aligned organization redesign. The second important element that comes in is the organizational change impact. Now, obviously, the important area that brings in there is that are we a custodian of a process, and the AI happens to be one of the tools we use for doing that activity, or are we the chaperones of the process and we are using AI for better outcomes? Because in the previous session, as was mentioned, we cannot equate the knowledge the system will bring in there, but we have the control in terms of its emotional context, its business context, its contextual relation, everything. And I think that is something that has to be done by the role and not so much by the machine itself. So I think that's the second important aspect, is how do we therefore bring in the organizational change. And the third aspect, and I think we heard that earlier today also, is whole thing about a playbook. Can this be repeatable? Can this be something that can be utilized? Can this be something which has guardrails? Can this be something which has the necessary controls for alerts when things are not going right? Are all those things coming into play? And I think that playbook approach, we've seen that adoptions very early on in maybe some functions such as, say, service operations, where we had maybe, for example, runbooks available for doing certain pieces of work. But runbooks are only one element of it. There are many other elements in terms of control point, decision factors, KPIs, and so on and so forth. So the whole idea is, how do we assimilate this into a complete playbook ecosystem, so that when organizations are adopting it, they're adopting it with an intent that they understand this whole correlation from design to chaperoning to execution, and the whole thing therefore has to come together as a part of the ecosystem. I think this is where a good segue comes in terms of Mike, what are the governance facets? How do we control it? I think we had some good conversation last time. So hand back to you. And
well, I was going to say, it sounds like what you were mentioning is all of the possibilities of AI, but alignment on what are the guardrails. So you could have be you, we could all agree on the guardrails and what that thing is supposed to do. But a computer will always give you what you ask for, but it won't necessarily give you what you want or what you need. It'll just give you what you ask for. Now, on a high level, I'm talking about low level, like, HR interviews and AI HR. You got two AI people talking to each other, and it's hilarious. But this is what people are doing. But that's pretty small scale when you think about strategic misalignment and the chances of nuclear war, which are 10 to 20% if we don't have the proper guardrails. Now, that's because AI hallucinates. Let's bring it back down a little, though, from that. Two, how do we stop AI from hallucinating? I mean, what is that? That's the problem, right? Like, the biggest problem in the world. And I think, Jev,
yeah, I'll chime in right there, actually, because the irony of hallucination or drift or loss of context, I mean, we're going to hear it in multiple conversations that are going to address it in this stage, that, the AI will do something wrong, i.e. will hallucinate or drift. And how do we really solve for that? In fact, Praful, he actually came up with a really good point there about context being the mode in order to avoid this. But it's not just context, because the thing about context is that, how do you deal with very dense context? How do you deal with very complicated context? How do you deal with the context shifting even slightly or just subtly to some degree, right? And, the solutions that really we're not really looking at here is, how do we get the model to think as best as we want it to think? Because me personally, I'm a techno-optimist, right? I don't share the sentiments with other people about AI replacing people. I mean, I work at the frontier with some of these companies that are actively building foundational models, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that AI will never replace people. You can quote me on that a couple of years from now, I guarantee you. However, what it will do is augment people. AI in and of itself, you can look at it as second order cognition, and why I'm actually giving you this additional context is because, second order cognition, how we actually arrive there is by offloading or intelligence, or offloading or thinking to the models themselves for it to return back, the answer, right? We don't go through that intense layers of critical thinking, right? We kind of just offload it to the model. But herein lies the problem. We offload that critical level of thinking to the model, and then it returns bullshit. Why does it do this? We want it to ourselves, right? But if you really think about it, the model in and of itself is not optimizing all the time to give us the right answer. And the problem with that is because it loses context, back to Praful's point. However, to take that a little bit further, what I'm actually building in and of itself is a solution towards that, right? Because, what we're lacking is not just better context, right? Because it started with better prompting, right? That's what people are saying, oh, you got to just prompt it better. Okay, cool. Put together 5 prompts, now you have a prompt chain. Oh, now you're doing prompt chaining. Fantastic news. Now it's going to think better. No, it loses context again. Then we started talking about context engineering. Great, you're kind of setting a scaffold for the model to operate within. But then guess what? After a certain amount of time, it's just going to drift again, right? So you take it from context engineering now to institutional thinking, constitutional thinking, if you will, right? A certain set of not guardrails, but constraints by which the model can think within in order to think within a certain environment and also operate and optimize for better output in this case. Now, I'm not going to get into all the technical aspects of it. I don't want to bore everybody with all this stuff. But, in order to kind of solve for this hallucination.
Would it be like the kid thing?
Yeah, no. In fact, this is a great example, actually. Well, not the one that you're going to go off, but there's an example that I kind of use.
I have a really good example. Not the one he gave me.
No,
this other guy.
Because, hear me out. So, AI in and of itself, we can all agree is an infantile stage, right? But it's a super intelligence in and of itself because it has all this knowledge. So imagine a 5-year-old trying to answer questions on calculus. Doesn't really know how to arrive at the right answer, but it just says it, and it's confident saying it. Exudes this confidence, but it's wrong. Now, if you really think about it, take that same child, and that child now, is introduced to a constitution set of laws, right? That gives it a governance of way of thinking, or a more governed way of thinking. That child will now arrive at a better answer, naturally, because it has a better way to arrive at that answer, right? And, another example I'll give you just to chew on it a little bit further, think about us as human beings, right? Human beings without a constitutional set of governing laws will always collapse into chaos and mediocrity. A civilization without a set of governing laws will collapse into mediocrity and chaos. Likewise, a model without a set of governed laws will always just collapse into mediocrity and chaos, which we now know as drift or hallucination, right? So, just to kind of end that whole point, because I know I was a little bit long-winded, what we actually need is better cognition, not more memory, not better runtime, not better inference, because we have all of that going on in the frontier labs. Thank you, OpenAI and Google and Anthropic for continuing to push the limits of models. But what we need is better cognition, better ways of thinking, plain and simple.
I totally agree. This whole idea of faster and easier. Oh, look, I made this. It's so fast and easy. Well, is it good? Do you know what good looks like? Because I don't vibe code, because I don't know how to code. I don't know what good code looks like, so why bother making code? I'm thinking I'm making the Mona Lisa. I'm making hand fingerprinting, it also extends to, I see video AI, which I think Sora just went under, but I see people who have no idea how to make a film, make 8-second clips and say, look what I made, Hollywood's dead. I'm like, no, I think it's safe for now. But Hollywood should embrace AI. And we will not automate ourselves out of obsolescence in that industry. Now, how much time, man?
We got a good time. But I kind of wanted to chime back in on that point of, us automating ourselves into obsolescence. Yeah, I said it earlier, AI is not going to replace humans, right?
Yeah.
But, that whole idea of obsolescence, kind of just like looking at us as people as being entirely useless in a consumer-based economy doesn't make sense. It's entirely incongruent, right? Because, if we ourselves are obsolete, but we are the ones spending money in the economy, where are we going to head after that, right? And straight to the collapse. However, I will say that, automation, once it's introduced in a way that we can identify the different ways to automate our workflow, automate our systems, we're already doing it in different ways. It's happened consistently over the course of human history. Automation is introduced in different ways, but whether or not we'll arrive at a certain place of obsolescence, without question, that's not going to happen. But what we can't see is over the horizon, right? What happens when this automation of intelligence now starts to kind of be more permeating in all of these various industries, right? And I think, Rick, you had a good example of when you're introducing automation into the whole thing, so not just brute force, just stuff it in there, but incrementally, right?
Yeah, bring it in different steps and test each level, and always be willing to say, this next step didn't work, bring it back. Setting up your workflows is important. But as you're working and looking at a workflow for whatever process that you have, for whatever business that you're in, look at the things that can most easily be replaced with an AI and don't affect your brand, your trust factors that you have with your clientele and your customers, all of those things that ultimately lead to sales and conversions for your business. Those are the areas you have to protect and keep closest at heart. And eventually there may be some of those that you can release over to AI, but there are so many things right now that you can automate and bring in and let your people have more time to work in other areas. We use it from when we're doing optimizations for content on websites. We don't just ask AI to write new content for a website or change the content. We start to look and say, okay, why would we want to write new content for a certain page? Do we want to rank for something new on a search engine, or is it that we need to have better calls to actions on pages or an easier flow on a page? All of those things are the start-off points, and then you can build that into your AI structures.
You know, Rick, before I want to hand it to Dragana, you reminded me,
Yes.
your tool of automation could have been so useful to Lucille Ball when that chocolate,
Chocolate factory.
she couldn't keep track of it. That thing needed to be pared back, right? Yeah. So think of all the chocolates that could be saved. Anyway.
Yeah, I would like to share also my point of view, where enterprise should also look at reinventing its processes and a customer experience journey, because I think that if the enterprise continues just to put a plaster, use AI to put a plaster on a broken process, it's going to get out of business. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be replaced by an AI native enterprise that is going to take all of the customers themselves, because they're already thinking in AI way. And the reason for that being that when in a couple of months or a couple of years an enterprise wakes up and looks at a window, it will notice that the world has changed, that now the buyers are not people anymore, they are AI agents representing people. The vendors are not anymore vendors, they are agents of those vendors, and the whole process is changed. So from my perspective, AI should be used to reimagine the processes and reinventing the new ways of doing things. And with that also comes the new skills. So yes, if AI is better at doing something like reading 100 pages document and summarizing, let AI do that. But let's specify why and why humans and where humans are better, and actually analyze skill by skill. So redefine the process, reimagine the process, and then see who is going to do what role. And that's the winner.
I think we already know.
Can I just make one observation? So I think there are two very interesting point of views, and I think this is coming, so this was a good example that was kind of brought in there. For two of my clients, there are some very interesting points of things, or cases that we kind of picked up. One, obviously, as you know, that in the drug discovery life cycle, synthesis planning, which is typically to do the first molecular segregation in terms of which will be taken up as a part of the R&D process, and then the whole life cycle of how a molecular injection impacts a cellular structure or a functioning is typically driven on top of maybe, for example, a very strong neural network-based ecosystem, which immediately detects patterns and changes and be able to kind of do a reflection of an impact of a molecular injection to a cellular behavior, which is basically what you, as clinicians, we look at when we look at maybe how cells behave, and therefore should we take this path to pursue to do a new drug, or should we eliminate this early on because it'll be detrimental from achieving its therapeutic goals. That's a very beautiful case. There is a very simplistic algorithm that exists. Facebook used to do it for facial recognition. If you give it to a cellular level, the same cellular structure changes are so evident that we've been able to look at something close to nearly about 95% plus change impact impressions as an area which like how does the cell behaves when a particular molecule combination is given to it, and is it really addressing the therapeutic goal it is supposed to be. Now it is a simple algorithm which was just a simple visual recognition of a shape detection, which has now been taken into a role of this nature. Another interesting one that you see is also from a very live ecosystem, flights, the aviation ecosystem, where you see the flights taking off and landing, but you also have the whole aspect of disruptions. let apart, take out the disruption that may happen from a standpoint of an unnatural event. But a lot of disruptions in terms of the normal takeout can be due to holidays, social, special events, can be due to maybe seasonality, can be due to maybe, for example, the time of the day and so on and so forth. Ability to detect anomalies here become a very beautiful case where AI can come and play a role. But in both the situations that I mentioned to you, both of them are coming from a regulatory industry. Both of them are core business process of organizations. And for both of them, the efficacy of the guardrail becomes a very, very critical part. So how do you bring that efficacy on the guardrail? And obviously, it goes back to a point, humans are not getting obsoleted because automation comes in. Humans will take up roles which are more governance-centric, cognition-driven, to do maybe selection of choices between option A and option B, rather than maybe doing the whole calculation for what the option A and option B are. And I think that's a very interesting part, and that's where I think the contextual modeling in terms of maybe the guardrail ecosystem that gets set up becomes very, very critical for everything that we do. And I think that's a point I think we should take away, stating that maybe when we do it, let's not only look at processes that may be secondary in nature or are repeatable and highly, but also processes that can actually be core to your business, yet can use technology to be able to enhance it and improve it and accelerate it. I think that's the point.
How crucial is it when you build the guardrails for the software? Say you're developing software, new software. How important is it for at the beginning part, front loaded, for everyone to be in absolute sync on what it is they're doing, why they're doing it, and really, really rack their brains for any failures of imagination on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being the best, the highest.
I'd say it's 10 because I mean, listen, like when you introduce, like, say, a model into a very complex process, and you were talking about needing to ensure that the whole like 99% like I guess hit rate, for example, I'll use that in this context, but that is just not enough to a certain degree, because once again, when you kind of extrapolate that over a long period of time, one number, like from even an accounting perspective, from a mathematical perspective, a difference in one digit can amount to a critical failure down the line, right? Yes. I mean, that doesn't really look like much of a big deal now, but once you start to scale the system and you realize that, wow, this failure mode started off as, oh, okay, a bug, and now it's quite frankly a complete system-wide failure. I mean, you really have to consider these things from the ground up, right? You have to build with that in mind, but not guardrails, because the idea of guardrails, and why I built the system that I built, or at least the infrastructure that I started building, is because I thought guardrails were just like, it's so ad hoc, right? We're thinking about, oh, what can we do to stop something that might happen in the future? But you're not really accounting for, the X factor, like all the various extraneous variables that might come up after the fact, right? You got to build a system from the ground up with it in mind that I need to account for every single fail state, every single fail mode. And I mean, the best way you can do that is to start with a constitutional layer, but also grow with an institutional way of thinking, right? And institutional meaning that context that the model in themselves are growing in. And I mean, we started speaking about software first, but software in of itself nowadays all has AI implemented or integrated with it. So once again, kind of building from the ground, whereas, a constitutional like standpoint, scaffolding, but institutional in the sense that it learns and grows within that particular context.
So you don't have to tell it to.
So you have to tell it over and over again, hey, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way.
Child advancement, but it's just like, yeah. So when you tell your kid, if you have kids, your 5-year-old kid, hey, get ready for school, do you have to tell him, first put on your underwear, then your socks, and then your pants, then your shoes?
Yeah.
There are marginal cases. But what this software can do is intuit, oh, get ready for school. I'm not going to need to be told how. Whereas other software that doesn't have it is going to come walking out of the room with their underwear on their head, their pants, as their jacket, and their jacket as their pants, because they didn't know exactly what order to do. They just knew to put on this stuff to get ready for school.
Yeah. And no context. It's a really good example. And I wanted to give his example a little bit more light there, because like put it into context, right? You're on chat's interface and you type in, same deal like a child, like go get ready for school. And chat now starts to optimize how quickly it can answer, i.e. in this analogy, the child comes running out of the room, shorts on his head and a sock on an arm, and it's like, wait a minute, that's not what I told you to do, right? But,
It is though. You asked the,
but it is
you asked the computer,
but I
and
only
the computer
use 80
didn't give you what you
tokens.
wanted. What'd you say?
Right? You only use 80 tokens. but now, once again, to tie it back to context, you tell the child, put your shorts on your legs, one leg at a time, put the shirt on your back, right? And it comes out fully dressed. But then you tell the child that over and over and over and over again, and then one day it comes out with a sock on the arm again. You're like, dude, why are you doing this?
Dragana, could I get your
I
take on this?
just wanted to also talk about a very important concept that builds on what your guy is saying, which is called evaluations. Evaluation of the performance of different part of agentic solution. And this is because most people think when they launch agentic solution in enterprise, done. No, that's exactly when the life cycle of agentic product starts. And from that moment, you always have to be evaluating the performance, and you have to have all of the KPIs, you have to have all of the logs, because the model can drift. And the most important part is that AI is based on data. So garbage in, garbage out. So if your data changes in the process, even you didn't make any mistake, you didn't break any constraint, you didn't break any anything that you defined as a policy, it still may give you wrong result because models are not deterministic, they are probabilistic. So in order to counter that effect and the nature of LLM, you need to evaluate every part of the system. And that's really a special place in agentic solutions, and it's called evaluations.
And there's not just QC up front, but there's got to be quality control that goes on consistently as you're going through the process. And make a realization, just like humans are fallible, AI is going to be fallible in the same way. And when you find somebody that works for you as a staff member and they do something wrong, you don't yell at them. You basically go and you find out, okay, where did you fail? Where was the failure at? How do we fix it? And then build that into all of your future systems. So you're talking about the playbook idea. Those playbooks are going to grow over time, and you're going to be able to enhance, just like you were talking, as you add each of those guardrails that everything's going to go in. We can't assume that the guardrails that we build now are going to be working fine 8 months from now. There's going to have to be new guardrails and new things added in all the time. And so the really good schools that are teaching AI now are not just teaching the knowledge side of it. They're having whole classes on ethics. They're teaching them, what's a process, how to look at workflows properly, how to analyze a workflow and see if there's things that are wrong with it in the current system, and then make adjustments. All of those things are what they're teaching in order to get around that whole aspect of not having the jobs in the future.
Yeah, but what you mentioned there is the teaching. Is this is really what I'm worried about, is that our brains as a species are going to atrophy. We're just not going to be good at anything anymore, except for the exceptional few who actually care. Because we all had to learn how to write. We all had to learn how to do math. We had to take Latin and French and all that stuff. And now we can apply that critical thinking to AI. But the generation coming up with no jobs in the lower levels, how are they going to learn? Where is wisdom to come from?
So
I think it's the opposite, actually.
Me too.
I actually think it's the
wisdom comes
opposite.
from
I think it's the most amazing time to be alive, because the things you can learn used to
I didn't
take
say that.
years, and now with one simulation, the example was the protein fault. The things that you can build on top of that, because it has been democratized, like you can literally look forward to wake up and start working on that, because you can see the result of your work so much quicker, and also it's tangible result because you can save lives.
The intellectually excitable,
yes,
active person will, yes. What you asked before, what is the thing that differentiates? If we can automate everything and sequence everything, well, then what differentiates us is what will it be? What will it develop? It's been here the whole time. It's the human ability to create new things. It's creativity, the one thing machines do not have. They don't have emotions. They're stochastic parrots. They can say love, but they don't know what it feels like. They can say lost, they don't know what it feels like. And that's what LLMs do. They say words, but they don't feel them. And that's the problem with that. But
I actually wanted to piggyback off of what Dragana was saying there, because I also share her sentiments, like the optimism about today's day, because The funny thing is that most kids in college these days, I mean, her as a professor, she sees this all the time. Kids will just hop on GPT, generate a paper, boom, I'm done, right? And quite frankly, like, of course, once again, this is the reason why I'm building what I'm building, because if we allow for, the system in and of itself to not do these things, then we'll be in a better world. But effectively, if these kids in college are able to gain access to information this quickly, the curriculums will change because they are able to now assimilate information that much more quickly. Now, I'm not saying that they should all be on GPT all day generating papers and then just not thinking about what they're doing, but they should be taking more time to really think about the different aspects of what they're writing in the paper, right? Their hypothesis, how they arrive at that hypothesis, and the structure of their thinking, but with AI involved. Because, when we think about it, we're talking about AI amplifying everything that we can do. AI can also amplify the rate at which we learn. However, we don't want it to just tell us what it is, because we all seen this, that we can't just rely on it just to tell us what it is, but we want it to tell us, how to arrive at a specific answer. We take that now, and we kind of do it in a somewhat of a recursive loop to kind of start building upon our answers, building upon our hypotheses.
How to check on primary sources. I always, whenever I make a statement, I go back to the very first source. Because
Verify it.
Yeah,
what was that?
valid.
You like that too?
QC?
Nerds. Because I can't trust it. If I don't see where it came from and that document, I don't trust it. And especially ever since ChatGPT told me that Predator was Rocky and Aliens.
The movie.
Yeah. Predator, the movie Predator. What's wrong with that? Rocky and Aliens, you get Predator. Rambo plus Aliens, you get Predator. And it didn't know that, and I knew that. So it gets a lot of stuff wrong. We call it hallucinations, but question? You just rubbing your head? Anyone have any questions?
We do have time.
We do have time for.
I just want to say, for people that do use AI and I use it often, I think you need curative intelligence in addition to your critical thinking skills. Now, I'll give an example. So, Chad is my right-hand man, right? He's Gemini. And I'll ask him something, right? And out of all the paragraphs, he might get one thing wrong, but then I say, what, Gemini, is this correct? And then they'll correct themselves, be like, I'm sorry, this is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
So I think you got to train people that you got to ask and also be proactive.
That's the cognition I'm describing. Yeah.
And you can build that into like your agentic systems that you're doing, where you actually have it build in and do its own checking to make sure that it didn't mess something up. And if it does, go back to this step and start all over again. And the great thing is, it's not like it's lost time. Like if you had a worker doing that and you said, no, you're at step 8 and I need you to go back step 2, you've lost a lot of work that's there. But that isn't the same when we're dealing with agentic systems.
Very interesting. I think you brought a very interesting play because, for example, in-process check and in-process validation is a very interesting use case that can be picked up here, because what you're doing is you're actually putting a checker in real time, and it is not post facto. It'll accelerate the whole process, compress the whole process output time. I think that's a very interesting use case that can be picked up. And it's possible every place. It can be taken up for, say, a triage in a clinical situation. It can be taken up for legal document summarization in case of maybe whatever. Many such issues can come in play there.
We were talking about earlier, not the actual surgeon, but the ability to have an acute ability to go to the millimeter, which is really important in surgery. The robot could do it. The person could say, okay, now make sure to not do this and do this, and the robot could do that perfectly. That would be a huge game changer, because
I also have one thing for you as well, by the way. LLM as a judge. You should probably look that up. It's something in practice right now in AI research where, necessarily speaking, they're leveraging a model in order to verify and validate the output from another model. So
And I also think, I don't know if you're already using it, but that some browsers like Perplexity and Comet actually synthesize answer coming from different LLMs, and then they remove the outliers.
Yes.
And therefore, exactly. But if you do go for a foundational model like LLM without that synthesis, my favorite prompt is critique your own answer. And then suddenly comes up saying this was not a good answer. And it gave it to me.
If anyone wants a Dan jailbreak to get the real, well, anyway. No, I agree. I totally agree. I think the one problem is it doesn't know its own limits, and it has a sort of, like anthropic studies. Did anyone read the studies they did with the model engineer? And the AI tried to kill him. because he was trying to shut down the process. Look it up. It's not. It was a test case. It was a test case. But I'm saying, if you're asking, is it going to we're going to get obsolete or become obsolete? Well, I would say dead is obsolete. But anyway, I think that's no. You know what? Let's end on a high note. Who likes Abbey Road? Isn't that the best album ever?
More questions. Everybody else has
we
a
have
question,
time?
though. Yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah, we have time. White Album? We'll be talking. Any other questions? Whose album is it?
I think one of the things, when we were talking earlier, that we all agreed on, though, AI as it is right now is not going to take away as many jobs as what robotics with agentic systems will do, probably in about 3 to 5 years. And those are going to actually be the harder jobs to retrain people from, to get them into other positions. So I know you talked earlier about the jobs that have disappeared in the tech area. The great thing is, I believe most of those tech people will find new positions and doing new things, and it could be in some of the AI areas or new areas that they haven't even thought about. But the other jobs, I think, are going to be the ones that will be the most difficult to try and
the tough ones are in my area, the content creation, because I can't say objectively, hey, that's better than that. It's up to judgment. And people who, it's not a fair market, really. A lot of people have bad judgment. So, hey, but the guy who did the cinematography for Game of Thrones, or no one could see a thing, thought he did a great job. Anyway, we should wrap it up here. Positive note, White Album fan right over there. Stand up, take it up. Just let's give her a round of applause. Even Revolution 9. Anyway, shall we all?
Yeah, thank you.
Are we standing here?